The needle dips. The thread slides. In the hush of the lamplit room, the sound is almost holy, like prayer whispered beneath breath. What if each stitch carried more than thread? What if it carried intention? What if a coat could become a vessel, not of warmth, but of retribution? The summer of 1855 lay heavy over Alabama, its air swollen with heat, its sky the color of tarnished brass. Cicadas shrieked in the magnolias, and dust clung to every surface of the sprawling cotton plantation. The master's house stood wide and white on its hill, a columned monument to wealth, but even its paint was peeling, the boards sighing in the humidity. Inside, the family prepared for the coming cool, though the air still stank of sweat and the iron tang of blood from the fields. Amid that ordinary preparation, Louisa bent over her work. She was a seamstress of extraordinary patience, her stitches finer than anyone in the county. Her presence was not loud, nor was it meant to be. Louisa's silence was her shield, her power, and her curse. She spoke rarely, not because she could not, but because words were often taken from her mouth before they could bloom. Better to let the needle speak. Her eyes, dark, steady, unblinking, seemed older than her years. Her skin bore the faint scars of lashes, hidden beneath the sleeves of her plain dress. Her hands, calloused yet delicate, moved with a steadiness that unsettled those who watched her. Some swore she stitched without looking, as though the fabric yielded to her will alone. In the evenings, when the others murmured prayers or collapsed into exhausted sleep, Louisa remained upright in the glow of a single lamp, her back straight, her needle moving. The master trusted her with his clothing, for he valued appearances. His winter coat, imported wool and lined in silk, had been given into her keeping. The garment, though meant for protection, lay across her lap like a body awaiting burial. She stroked the fabric slowly, as if feeling its breath. The world around her seemed unaware of the shift beginning to stir. Children still laughed in the dust. Overseers still barked their commands. The house still smelled of yeast bread and tobacco. Yet in the corners of that life, shadows gathered. The master began to cough, just once, then again, his face tightening as though bitten from within. Doctors were summoned. They peered into his eyes, tapped at his chest, and left powders in brown glass bottles. Their ledgers, neat and merciless, recorded each visit: fever, ague, prescribed tonic. They spoke of humors gone sour, of swamp air thick with poison, of ailments no one could quite name. He drank the bitter draughts, but the cough lingered, spreading like mildew through his body. Meanwhile, Louisa continued her work. She stitched hems, mended seams, and lined the coat with practiced hands. Her silence deepened, her presence growing spectral. She walked the halls barefoot, her shadow falling across walls like a passing cloud. The women of the house whispered, "She sees too much. She says too little." In the fields, whispers thickened into rumor. Livestock sickened. A hound writhed and foamed until death stilled it. A boy muttered that Louisa had passed the well at night, her figure gliding through the mist. Others claimed she hummed to herself in an ancient tongue as her needle danced. Fear coiled in their throats, but none dared speak it aloud before the master. Louisa herself gave no sign. Yet within her heart beat a history carried from Virginia, where her mother had once gathered herbs in the dark, leaves sharp with bitterness, roots that burned the tongue. From her mother she learned that the world offered remedies and poisons alike, and that sometimes the difference lay only in intention. She remembered her mother's words, hushed into her ear before being sold away: "Every stitch is binding. Every thread is power." She had witnessed cruelties too large for language: backs torn open, children dragged from mothers, her own body marked by pain. Trauma had shaped her into something quiet but unyielding, a vessel of patience. At night, in the solitude of the sewing room, she sometimes pressed powders into the folds of cloth, her lips closed, her expression unreadable. The master's coat grew heavier in her lap, each seemed dense with meaning. By day it appeared only as fine handiwork, invisible labor serving a man who barely glanced at her face. By night it became something else, a testament, a reckoning stitched in silence. The master's illness deepened. He sweated through his sheets, groaning as though dragged into the earth itself. The doctors scribbled notes, muttered of swamp fevers, and bled him until his skin turned waxy. The household shivered at every cough. And still, Louisa sewed. One evening, when the air was thick with thunder and the lantern flame wavered against the dark, a young servant swore she heard a sound through the walls. Not words, not prayers, but the low hum of a tune, steady as thread pulling through cloth. She pressed her ear to the wood, trembling, certain that the song came from Louisa's room. The servant told no one at first, but fear makes the tongue restless. Soon the story slipped into the corridors, passing from ear to ear like a contagion. And when the master groaned in fever, clutching the coat as though it could warm him against death's chill, that whisper returned, chilling all who heard it. Louisa, they said, was humming. The sickness spread like a shadow no doctor's lamp could banish. The master's skin turned gray, his lips darkened at the edges, and his breath rattled as though dragged from a cavern. His wife clutched the Bible by the bedside, trembling with prayers, while servants moved silently in the corridors, carrying basins of bloodied cloth. The physicians returned again and again, writing notes that filled pages, their language of humors and bile failing to explain the wasting body before them. Each day he grew thinner, as though something unseen stitched itself tighter around his lungs. The plantation felt the change. Animals died without reason, a cow collapsing mid-step, a horse refusing food until its ribs showed like bars of a cage. The children coughed through the night, their cries muffled by their mothers' hands. Overseers grew restless, muttering of swamp vapors, of curses that rose from the ground. And always Louisa's shadow lingered, gliding soundless across the walls. She had become a figure of unease. Some swore they saw her burying scraps of fabric near the well, her hands moving with the same steady rhythm she brought to her needle. Others whispered that her silence itself was a curse, that words, denied for so long, had become poison trapped in her body, seeping into the air. Still, no one accused her directly. Fear bound their tongues. Fear, and the absence of proof. The master's coat hung by the window, heavy and waiting. He wore it one Sunday to church, though sweat ran down his temples. His hands shook as he gripped the pew, and midway through the sermon he collapsed, sprawling across the wooden floorboards. Gasps swept through the congregation. They rushed to his side, but Louisa was not among them. Someone cried out that she had vanished before the fall, that her seat was empty though she had been there only moments before. When they returned to the house, she was gone. Her sewing room stood deserted, the lamplight still burning, spools scattered across the table like bones from a broken body. Scissors lay gleaming, the blade reflecting the flame. Scraps of half-sewn fabric covered the floor, threads trailing like veins cut open. In a drawer, beneath folded linens, they found a page torn from a diary. Unfamiliar handwriting, perhaps hers, perhaps not. The words were only half-formed, but they chilled the blood, to bind pain into cloth, to stitch silence into death. The master worsened quickly. His body burned with fever, his lips blackened, and his voice dwindled to a rasp that no one could decipher. For 3 days he lay in torment, and for 3 nights the house echoed with his cries. Some said they heard another sound beneath the wailing, a humming low and steady, drifting from the empty sewing room. On the 4th day he died, eyes bulging, hands clutching at the coat draped over the chair beside his bed. The women screamed, the overseers crossed themselves, though their faith was shallow. Doctors wrote in their ledgers, fever fatal, cause unknown. No one wrote Louisa's name. Her absence became a story before her footsteps cooled on the earth. Some claimed she fled into the swamps, vanishing among the reeds, her figure glimpsed once beneath the moon before dissolving into mist. Others swore she had walked calmly into the woods, carrying only a bundle and her needle, her back unbent, her silence intact. A child whispered that she dissolved into smoke at the moment the master fell, leaving only the echo of her humming. Without her, the house decayed. The mistress lost her mind, pacing halls that smelled of mildew, clutching the empty coat as though it might breathe life back into her husband. Fields lay fallow, cotton unpicked, until weeds choked the furrows. Within a decade the house itself blackened and burned, the flames licking skyward as if summoned by hands unseen. By morning, only ruins remained, stones black with soot and chimneys rising like broken teeth. But the legend did not burn. Travelers claimed to hear a faint sound when they passed the ruins at dusk, the soft scrape of thread through cloth, a humming that quivered in the air like a breath behind the ear. Some said scraps of fabric appeared in the weeds, stained dark, impossible to trace to any living hand. Children dared each other to call her name aloud, and those who did swore their shirts unraveled overnight, seams opening like wounds. The courthouse preserved the dry remains of the plantation ledgers, doctors' fees, burial costs, a list of ruined livestock. Nowhere did the records speak of Louisa. Nowhere did they confirm her guilt or her innocence. Only the town's memory held her, divided between fear and awe. To some, she was a poisoner, a witch who sewed curses into cloth. To others, she was justice made flesh, silence sharpened into a blade finer than steel. Time blurred her edges. Historians argued over fevers and epidemics, over whether the tales of poison belonged to folklore rather than fact. But the stories persisted, braided like thread through generations. They spoke of the seamstress who never raised her voice yet bound death into a master's coat. They spoke of her vanishing, of her legend, of the haunting. And if you walk the fields now, where weeds rise taller than a man, you may hear it still. A faint humming, low and steady, the sound of a needle-piercing fabric, of vengeance drawn tight through thread. The coat is gone, the house is gone, but the song remains. The story ends as it began, with silence. Yet silence that cuts deeper than any word. Louisa's silence. Louisa's power. Which city are you watching our video from? Please leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel as well for more historical stories. Thank you.